It's time. You're tuned in to the final episode of the Meneghini Mixdown.
Meneghini Mix.
Live on 91.3 WHJE. This is Ethan Meneghini for the Meneghini Mixdown.
You better watch this.
Good morning, Carmel. You're listening to 91.3 WHJE. It's that time of the week, that time of this fine Friday morning. You're listening to the Meneghini Mixdown, and I'm your host, Ethan Meneghini, here to bring you for one final time the best in electronic dance music content, the best in EDM music in and around Carmel. Yes, you heard me right. It's the last episode, the final episode of the Meneghini Mixdown, at least as it is live on 91.3 FM here on WHJE. It's been a long ride. It's been a long time. I started doing this show late my sophomore year. I guess it was kind of interesting because at that time I was still just I had just become a staff member here on the radio station, which was crazy, and I was just getting into learning how to actually manage and operate a weekly show. And at the time, I think I was doing it at 6:30 to 7:30 on Tuesday mornings. So my intro, I would say it was a fine Tuesday morning. And this year, because just of the change, I had ended up going with Friday mornings. And so it actually, the alliteration actually works out better with a fine Friday morning, I think, personally. But that aside, it's been a long time. And back then in my sophomore year, I was constantly saying, I had tons of fillers, and I think I had yet to master my craft really. And so I think at this point I've been very, very proud of what I've done. And, it's just been my child, my live show, my baby. I've been doing it for about it's genuinely been 2.5 years now. So I think I had started my second semester of sophomore year and then carried it into, my junior year. It was actually funny because during my sophomore year, when I was actually kind of thinking of names for this show, it wasn't really a set show. I was just having a show to, do my grade at that point, and I didn't really know what I was doing. So I just called it the Meneghini Mixdown, and I didn't have an actual intro or anything. I would just call it that, kind of just because occasionally. And so I actually thought that the more I said it, I thought the name was actually a pretty solid name. And so here we are today with, an intro and everything. And I've got my intro line and everything. So it's been a wild ride. But, for this special, final episode, I'm going to be going over all of my favorite tracks from the whole entire show that I've ever played. Some of them coming from days that I've done album reviews, some of them coming from days where the singles come out that morning. A couple of them I have on here. So it's just going to be a big variety of tracks. We're going to start out with some more electro-pop sounding tracks, and then we're going to move into a lot more aggressive dubstep and trap stuff, and then we're going to close out with some hard rock. Those of you would recognize the band Era, which I reviewed would have been last month, would have been last month, early April, when I reviewed that project. We're going to be talking about a lot of stuff today, and which is going to be interesting because this is the longest music total playtime that I've had, I think, for a while. 35.5 minutes of total track playtime. So I'm going to have to try to budget my talking quite well today. But I think that's a good thing. And I guess I won't really hesitate to exceed the 8:30 mark because I actually don't have anywhere to be after 8:30. I don't have any classes to be at till noon. So we're going to be comfortable in the music time here today. My goodness, it's going to be a crazy show for everyone. Hope you guys enjoyed that intro too as well. That intro track there, the background track was Cabbage by Effin, which is what I actually used as my first intro that I had made for season 1 and 2 of the Meneghini Mixdown, or I guess the technical season 2, which was early in my junior year. And then my season 3 was the end of my junior year, I believe, if I'm correct. So season one began my junior year because that's when it became, official. And then season 2 actually was the end of my junior year, which was right when COVID started. So season 2 never got an 8th episode. So I have a playlist in all of my playlists that I've made for the show. I have an 8th that was never used. So I have an 8th playlist that was never used for season 2, which like it's kind of crazy to me because we got cut off so short then. But now, of course, we've actually been able to do the Meneghini Mixdown all of this year, despite the hybrid craziness. So everything's been good. Everything's been good in that regard. So let's move through the intro banter as I keep talking through all of the things I'm feeling right now. Let's start out with the first track, Something Comforting by Porter Robinson. This was a single released last year ahead of the full release of Porter Robinson's latest full-length album, Nurture, which was a phenomenal project. I loved listening to it, still love listening to it. I've yet to really take it in and really just, I guess it was such a long time coming because, he had released this project before that. It had been 7 years of a gap between his 2 major projects. The track in particular, Something Comforting, it was full of bright synths, wonderful melodies, this beautiful piano outro, and really once hearing this track, it kind of showed where the style was going with that album. The vocal style is super unique, and he just kind of was able to kind of glitch it in a certain way in this track that really set a specific tone for the rest of the album, and he really followed through with it. And overall, the end goal, the end project was just phenomenal, and I really, really enjoyed it. So let's go ahead and start this one off here this morning. This is Something Comforting by Porter Robinson here on 91.3 WHJE, the Meneghini Mixdown.
If I send this void away, have I lost a part of me? When you wake, you're bargaining for the promise to come back. 'Cause getting made you want more, and hoping made you hurt more. Oh, there must be something wrong with me. And getting made you want more, and hoping made you hurt more. Someone tell me something comforting.
That was Something Comforting by Porter Robinson here on 91.3 WHJE, the Meneghini Mixdown. A phenomenal track, beautiful track from Porter Robinson's latest full-length album, Nurture. Really, really beautiful project. I mean, that same kind of vocal style, the glitching you noticed there kind of at the end or the later half of the track really was just kind of one of the major focal points of that album. And it really was phenomenal. Next up, we're going to transition into another one of my favorite projects. This one actually was released in 2019. I did a whole review of it. The tracks before it was released, I talked about. I really love the project overall. Still one of my favorite projects to date. Good Faith by Madeon, released in 2019. One of the songs from it, probably my favorite off the whole project, All My Friends. Really just a phenomenal track overall. Super funky, the drums super powerful, super slick bass lines. This album was actually Grammy nominated, and it did not win, unfortunately, in the 2020 Grammys. It was just, I don't know why. It lost to Kate Renata's full-length project. I forget what it was called, but at that time it was just a good project, and still is to date. I've really enjoyed it so much. And the vocals and the chorus in this track are just a huge part of the track for me. Lyrically, it's just a phenomenal track. So I think we might as well jump into this one. This is All My Friends by Madeon here 91.3 WHJE, the Meneghini Mixdown. That was All My Friends by Madeon here on 91.3 WHJE, the Meneghini Mixdown. Still, one of my favorite tracks to date. That project overall, Grammy nominated. Unfortunately, it did not win the Grammy in 2020, but it still got the nomination. It's one of my favorite projects to date. I love that album so much. Madeon continuing to do just phenomenal stuff in the EDM game, the electro pop scene. Just awesome stuff coming from him. Next up, Duo by Sam Galaitri. This one is a new single from actually earlier this year. This one is super interesting because I hadn't really heard anything like this from Sam Galaitri before. He had been doing a lot of this experimental trap stuff, and it was vocalless. He didn't have any vocals on it at the time. And Duo comes out. He's been a pretty large gap in a lot of his official releases at this point. And by this time, he hadn't done any vocal work. And he puts new vocals on this track, and it just shows how well versed he is in all the different forms of, production and these different types of EDM. It's crazy. This track, again, is similar to All My Friends, a little bit faster paced, but it's super funky, super slick. Again, this kind of funky aspect of EDM, the bright synths and the vocals, the way he kind of layered them down is really just phenomenal. And I really, really enjoy listening to this one. Easily one of my favorite new tracks out of all the tracks I've played on the Meneghini Mixdown thus far. This is Duo by Sam Galaitri here on 91.3 FM, the Meneghini Mixdown.
Whoever told you I don't care about you? Is that a friend you should keep around you? I try my best to remove all the doubts now. Our business is open for discussion. They think you can do better all alone. A couple strangers acting clever. Oh no, they come and go, it's temperamental. I told you so, I only care about forever. But wish you the best in all your future endeavors. Let's see where this goes and find out if we end up better. I'm convinced that I knew you best. I know you're sending paragraphs of words that came from someone else. Why'd you have to put me to the test? The pressure leaves the impression you're wanting something else. And why are all your friends paranoid? Do they not know how much that we were in love? Hope you're not stuck with this unfilled void. Gave you my everything and now I'm left with nothing just because they think you can do better. All alone, a couple strangers acting clever. Oh no, they come and go, it's temperamental. I told you so, I only care about forever. But wish you the best in all your future endeavors. Let's see where this goes and find out if we end up better.
That was Duo by Sam Galaitri here on 91.3 WHJE, the Meneghini Mixdown, a classic, short and sweet track. I think that one's really gonna stay as one of my favorite tracks for quite a while at this point. It was released earlier this year. I talked about it kind of in the week that it came out. Just a super interesting track overall. I haven't really been able to get it out of my head. Super, super groovy overall. My friend Nick Beckman has joined me here in the live studio to celebrate kind of the closing of the Meneghini Mixdown, not the closing, but the finale of the Meneghini Mixdown. Nick, why don't you hand me back my headphones and hop on the guest mic just real quick, so that we can we can talk for a moment. Nick, how are you doing on this fine Friday morning?
I'm doing great. It's a little early to be here, but I'm more than happy to be here for your finale.
You and Chris Elmore had both surprised me. I was in here just kind of doing my thing. I was checking all the meters, listening to the music that was playing, and of course you and Chris both walked through the door, and I thought it was actually our radio director, who was unfortunately not going to be here today, but I was like, my goodness, they've showed up. And
we did show up.
Yeah, I very much appreciate that, Nick.
We thought it would be a good idea to surprise him on his finale. So
of course, and you guys have always come through on coming into the show occasionally. I know we did one for Radiothon this year, and both of you were talking about certain things on that, and you've of course come on my show just on your own and done that occasionally. So you guys have been there for this whole time, and it's been awesome.
Yes, it has.
So I appreciate you guys coming in and hanging out. So let's jump into the next track. This next track, Ghost Voices by Virtual Self. Virtual Self is actually kind of Porter Robinson's alter ego, which is very, very interesting. His alternative alias. This one was actually Grammy nominated as well in 2018. He hasn't yet to release a really big project from Virtual Self. I haven't really heard anything besides these major singles that he's come out with over the last couple of years. But Ghost Voices remains to be one of the most classic tracks, I think, to date in terms of the new tracks, and just the melodies and the vocal chops that are present in it are going to remain classic in the EDM scene, and it's definitely gonna grow from there. And I still enjoy the track. It's so beautiful. The atmospheres, like I said, the vocal chops. It's just more electronic in nature compared to some of Porter Robinson's main stuff on the Porter Robinson alias, especially when we're talking about his latest release, Nurture. That stuff, it's really just more electronic in comparison, and both still sound phenomenal, but in their own ways. Angel Voices was another kind of remix of Virtual Self that was actually very popular in a video game known as Beat Saber, which is just kind of like a virtual reality drumming game, sort of, if you want to think about it that way. And that track is super fast paced, super electronic, and so a lot of Virtual Self stuff is just just gonna be crazy. So we're gonna jump into that one next. It's crazy for those of you that didn't really hear my intro segment at 7:30. This is the Meneghini Mixdown. For those of you that haven't heard it before, my name is Ethan Meneghini, in here talking about electronic dance music content, electronic dance music. And, this is the last episode, the last live iteration of the Meneghini Mixdown for this year, for forever, for on 91.3 FM, WHJE. And, it's probably going to continue. I have to somehow keep my passion of talking about music going somehow. So I'm likely going to continue, maybe recording album reviews or song reviews or something of that, like maybe a podcast for the future on my YouTube channel, just the Meneghini Mixdown. And, at some point it just had to end on the school side, at the station side. So the live 91.3 FM iterations today is the last episode. It's the finale of the Meneghini Mixdown. So figured I'd come in and just go out with a bang. So the next track here on the Meneghini Mixdown, this is Ghost Voices by Virtual Self here on 91.3 WHJE. That was Ghost Voices by Virtual Self here on 91.3 WHJE, the Meneghini Mixdown. Super awesome track there from Porter Robinson's kind of alter ego, Virtual Self. Grammy-nominated 2018 single from Porter Robinson's alter ego, whatever you'd like to say, Virtual Self. Awesome track there. Next up on the Meneghini Mixdown, RL Grime and Jewel's Formula. This one was a powerful 2019 single released to RL Grime's record label Sable Valley. This one kind of began the come up of a lot of smaller like trap artists that are now signed to Sable Valley, Jewel's being one of them. It's a couple of other artists, ISOXO, if I'm trying to think about it, maybe Frost Top, just a couple of lower trap artists that are more in the underground scene. And I've started listening to a lot of those guys, ISOXO really being one of them. Their stuff is just awesome, and they're kind of on the come up there, in part in thanks to RL Grimes' record label Sable Valley and kind of the community they've built around that. So it's been some really awesome stuff coming from them. But this track, I think in particular, is just really, really powerful, both for Jewel's and RL Grime. It's just some interesting, an interesting blend for trap between the two of them. RL Grime doing a lot of major stuff in the EDM scene and kind of almost even bringing it into the pop scene with UCLA, one of his major tracks that everybody was listening to at one point, at least in my age group. I know a ton of people were listening to that. RL Grime then headlined Lollapalooza, I think, in 2019, which I went to. That was crazy. It was a really, really good show. It was phenomenal to listen to. But of course, bringing in UCLA, was a very interesting thing. Nick, what do you have to say about the RL Grime show?
We also saw RL Grime at the Snake Pit.
Did we? What year was that?
I believe we did. I think it was 2018.
Okay, that's kind of interesting because I don't know, would we have stayed for that?
I think so. It was before he was bigger.
Let's actually take a moment here. Let's take a moment and figure out when this was, because I know we had obviously been to multiple of the Snake Pit shows.
Yeah.
RL Grime Snake Pit. Hang on.
He's looking it up on the computer.
Let's see. RL Grime 2017.
2017.
Yeah. Wow.
So we did see him.
So we would have. Let's look at the. This is the live track list. Or no. What? Okay. I'm trying to see who else was in the lineup at that time. It
was Zed, Marshmello.
Yeah, Zed, Marshmello. Wow. Okay.
Zed, Marshmello, RL Grime, Adventure Club.
Yep. So we had seen Adventure Club, RL Grime, we had both actually seen, because neither of those guys were headlining.
Yeah.
Zed was headlining. And
definitely.
I know we had seen Marshmello. And by that point in the day, Marshmello, everybody was nuts by that point. So that was definitely a good show. Wow, that's crazy. I didn't know that either.
And this guy didn't want to stay through Zed because his tummy hurt.
My tummy hurt. Yeah. I mean, that is a crazy environment to be in, let alone concerts, EDM shows, let alone, and then the Snake Pit was just Andy 500 craziness on top of that. So it was a very different kind of feeling, but it was very interesting. RL Grime's show was definitely great. And when he headlined at Lollapalooza, it had been after UCLA went really big, so his production kind of aspects at Lollapalooza were even crazier. So that show was just phenomenal. But we're going to jump into the track here. This is Formula by RL Grime and Jewel's here on 91.3 WHJE, the Meneghini Mixdown. that was Formula by R.L. Grime and Jewels here on 91.3 WHJE. The Meneghini Mixdown, a really kind of interesting trap track there from those two. Trap, just, those are just two powerhouses in the trap scene right now. Both R.L. Grime and Jewels. Jewels still coming up in the game. Signed to R.L. Grime's record label, Sable Valley. So some releases from them, I think, we'll definitely be waiting to see more of that from those two. Next up, a classic project from Virtual Riot. We actually just did kind of what I called an album revisit on this project, which I talked about way earlier in season 2 of the Meneghini Mixdown. The Save Yourself EP from 2019 from Virtual Riot. This track, Hysteria, coming from that one, is probably my favorite one. It has enough, variety in it that I don't really get bored with it. And I think after listening to a lot of the tracks on that project, I ended up kind of figuring out like I'm not really getting bored of a lot of these tracks anymore. I'm starting to really, really enjoy the way that these tracks sound. Hysteria in particular starts out with kind of this hard style kind of beat in the first drop, kind of a more four to the floor doons 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 kind of drop versus the typical dubstep drums that are half that time. And he varies it up quite a bit. He changes up the drop in the second half as well. It sounds like a more trap style thing. So Virtual Riot really doing varying a lot of things in the track, and it doesn't leave you bored versus a lot of the modern kind of dubstep tracks that you hear that are the same thing, bar and bar and bar again. This track in particular, again, the atmospheres as well outside of the drops, I think I just really, really like the synth work. Of course, Virtual Riot always going to be a master of mixing. He's a really good mixing engineer. And then on top of that, just his synth work and his melody work is just phenomenal. So Hysteria by Virtual Riot. This is the next one on the Meneghini Mixdown, 91.3 FM.
Can't never
That was Hysteria by Virtual Riot here on 91.3 WHJE, the Meneghini Mixdown. Another really awesome track from Virtual Riot coming from his 2019 EP, Save Yourself, which was released to Disciple Recordings. I think since then they've dropped the Recordings surname and they're just known as Disciple nowadays. But I still include Recordings because no one would know that they're a record label if I didn't mention it. Just a super varied track, multiple different kind of drop styles in one track. And I think you don't get bored halfway through the track because you're hearing the same thing over and over again. And Virtual Riot just knows his stuff in terms of production. He's been doing it for so long. I've been listening to him since, probably 4th or 5th grade at this point. So it's been a long time that I've known Virtual Riot, known his stuff. I don't know him personally, obviously, but that I've known his projects and different, tracks of his. So it's been awesome, playing his tracks and talking a lot about them on the Meneghini Mixdown. Speaking of the Meneghini Mixdown, for those of you that maybe have missed a couple of my segments, this is the finale of the Meneghini Mixdown, the last episode, done live on 91.3 FM WHJE. It's very interesting how long it's been that I've been doing this live show. It's been my baby. I've really just, wanted to just take it through to the end. And of course we're already here and it seemed like too fast. But, today for that kind of, occasion, we are going through some of my favorite tracks that I've played throughout the entirety of the show. All, 2.5 years, maybe I guess 5 school semesters, you could say, of doing the show. This is all my favorite stuff put into one show, into one track. Next up, Crash and Burn by Phase 1 and North Lane. This is kind of a super powerful kind of metal dubstep blend on this track. It might be the most aggressive we get on the show this morning. This one, interestingly enough, coming from Phase 1's 2019 LP Transcendency. This one is a kind of a metal electronic blend. Of course, Phase 1 has always done kind of punk rock and metal blends of dubstep in his sound, and he's been making that kind of his tone for quite a while now. Transcendency really brought in a lot more influences and really was just a full release project by that point. So it was a major project for not only Phase 1, but then Disciple Recordings, which released the project as well. His Phase 1's prowess shows here, but then he blends in the kind of stark vocals and instrumentals coming from North Lane, which is their kind of an alt or kind of new metal band or a metalcore band, however you'd like to describe the genre that they produce in. The big vocal section with the brighter guitars and vocals, the more singing aspect of it is probably my favorite part of the track. It's definitely what I love hearing and love listening to. The bass is just crazy. Everything about this track is just a lot of the aggression, the more aggressive genres that I listen to all in one package, and it's very fun to listen to. So next up here on the Meneghini Mixdown, this is Crash and Burn by Phase 1 and North Lane here on 91.3 WHJE, the Meneghini Mixdown.
What are you trying to prove to everyone else? Who is superior? How is your vision clearer than anyone else? Your head's in the sky, in flight, but you will crash and burn. But you will crash it! Crash it!
That was Crash and Burn by Phase 1 and North Lane here on 91.3 WHJE. The Meneghini Mixdown, a super aggressive kind of blend of hard rock, metalcore, something you might describe as that subgenre, combined with dubstep. Really just an interesting blend between North Lane and Phase 1. North Lane being signed to Unified, or UNFD, which I would imagine is kind of the same thing, the acronym. The same record label as Era, who we're going to be talking about later, released one of my favorite projects of this year, definitely my number one favorite project of this year. Still one of my favorite projects that I've listened to overall in terms of rock and even genres overall. But you know, at this point that we're going to transition into kind of the next segment, the next track, The Same by Wave Dash. One of my favorite Wave Dash songs to date. You know, they just recently released a full-length album, and you know, World Famous Tour really wasn't my favorite. It was kind of lackluster. They released 6 of the tracks of the project before actually fully releasing the album, and it was really just, you know, everything had already been said for me. The best tracks came out already, and they released the rest of the album, and it really just wasn't that satisfying for me. And I didn't end up doing a full review because I was just kind of underwhelmed, unfortunately, by that project. Now, this track, The Same, comes off their 2019 EP Opening Ceremony. We can see here, as the trend goes in this project, you know, this album playlist today, that 2019 was a really big year for music. So it's had a lot of good tracks. This track is kind of an interesting blend. Again, a big dubstep drop, but after that, it closes out in a really beautiful way with this kind of very interesting, you know, this interesting just punk outro. It actually samples vocals from Madion's Lil Loon as well, which is, you know, pretty interesting. They haven't really sampled that in kind of a dubstep fashion before. But this is the next track on the Meneghini Mixdown, The Same by Wave Dash. Here 91.3 WHJE, the Meneghini Mixdown. I kind of agree with Maddie on there. It definitely doesn't feel the same. That was The Same by Wave Dash. Here at 91.3 WHJE, the Meneghini Mixdown. Sampling those vocals here, he was sampling Madion's track Laloon from, I believe it would be his album Adventures from 2015, I think is where that track came from. So, definitely well versed in the electronic dance music scene. Wave Dash, those three being signed to, I think, Ausla at first, doing a track for one of their projects earlier on. So that was a very, very interesting track there from those two. Next up, we're closing out the show this morning with one of my favorite tracks of this year, coming from Era's fifth full-length project, self-titled. It would just be called Era by Era. 12 tracks long, a big project from Era. One of my favorites, at least so far. Easily my favorite song off the album, Vanished Canvas. It's just super interesting. The vocal melodies are there. The lyrics are there. The chugs of the metal are there. Everything's just awesome. Somehow it's just a blend between Nick Beckman is in the station right now. He is just pestering me, trying to get me to break, trying to get me to fall. And, I lasted a whole hour and 24 minutes without, being able to break.
You've already introduced me into the show once.
I know
you broke pretty early.
Well, sort of. I was able to get through all my segments, but I think this is the last one that I couldn't really get through.
Fair enough.
Without falling through. My great friends, David Wiederhaft, Chris Elmore, Nick Beckman, all residents of the WHJE station here, staff members, live shows, and sports, everything. They've come to support me here and stop by on the finale of the Meneghini Mixdown and support what I do. And I appreciate them being here so much. This is the final track of the finale, Vanished Canvas by Era. I'll come back on the mic after the track is over and kind of outro the show a little bit more, but this is it. Vanished Canvas by Era. Here on 91.3 WHJE, the Meneghini Mixdown.
Constellation
That was Vanish Canvas by Era here on 91.3 WHJE, the Meneghini Mixdown, a really awesome track from Era's fifth full-length project, their self-titled album, Era. Super, super awesome there. Thank you, everyone. This was the finale, for those of you that maybe missed one of the middle segments of the Meneghini Mixdown, the last live 91.3 FM WHJE episode of the Meneghini Mixdown. And, it's going to be interesting to close out here, to kind of sign off, but it's been a long ride. 2.5 years, maybe a little bit more of broadcasting, doing, crazy bass music and EDM music here on the station, and even some other things, as we've seen from this whole track list today, that there's been just a wide variety of styles and genres going across the Meneghini Mixdown that I've really loved listening to and talking about. So thank you to those of you, any of you that have tuned in, maybe if it was just today in the last, minute of the show, or maybe it was, a minute 2 years ago. I appreciate you, and I appreciate everything you've done for, my passions, and just taking a minute to kind of, open your mind a little bit, open your ears to maybe a genre you haven't really heard of or thought about before. So I appreciate that a lot. I appreciate everybody tuning in, for the last time here on 91.3 FM WHJE. This has been Ethan Meneghini signing off for the Meneghini Mixdown.